One of the questions I commonly get asked is what progression of the game should I be in to start playing dungeons? Now if you're a relatively new player and you're in this situation, then stick around because today we're going to answer it. So I don't want to waste any more of your precious time, so let's get on with the video. So I just want to preface the video by saying that ultimately Skyblock is an extremely open game and the possibilities are pretty limitless. And if you want to try and go to dungeons when you're skill level average 5, then I'm not going to stop you. I'm a strong believer of just playing the game however you want to play it because that's going to have the most enjoyment out of it. But in this video, I'm just going to be offering my personal opinion on when the ideal time to start dungeons is, and if I was to play the game again, probably what I would do. So, dungeons. Why do so many people rush it? To start off with, I'm just going to be going through some advantages to perhaps rushing dungeons and why people actually do it. You unlock the requirements with many essential progression items in the game. The notable items include Shadow Assassin armor from floor 5, Shadow Fury from floor 5, perhaps Liver Dagger but maybe less so, the Giant Sword from floor 6, and of course the Hyperion from floor 7. Another notable mention is the Spirit Scepter and the Spirit Bow from floor 4. A lot of players see these items and think to themselves that they want to get their hands on it in the quickest way possible, so they decide to rush dungeons. The second reason why I think a lot of people rush dungeons is that dungeons is actually a fairly fun skill to actually level up. And I can totally understand the appeal of doing dungeons rather than slaying around 10,000 Rev Slayer bosses. That being said, there are a lot of downsides. The first downside I think is probably the biggest factor, that you skip out on essential stages of progression. Progression is based on a lot of different things, but 3 key things for me at least are Skyblock level, like magical power and average skill levels, and then also your money. If you're rushing into Catacombs levels, then you're just going to get the gear, but your base stats are all going to be severely underleveled, but you're just going to be trying to compete with people when you have severely lower stats, and ultimately you're just going to end up dying. And that's why when people try to get into dungeons really early on in the game, it's just really not efficient for grinding it because they just die so often and they can't get into any good parties. I think we've all been those F7 parties where you have one person with combat 23 and a magical power of 250. Yeah, that's not good. The third and final reason for me that rushing dungeons is not as good as it used to be is because there's actually less content that is focused around the dungeons. 2 years ago, I would have said rushing dungeons wouldn't be so bad because the progression was solely based around dungeons. It was literally like you went from early game to Shadow Assassin and Liver Dagger or Shadow Fury, then to Giant Sword, and then to Hyperion and Storm and Necron. However, now with the release of the new End Island, Crystal Hollows, Crimson Isle of course, the progression is not as clear cut and it's a lot softer, and now you don't actually have to be as dependent on dungeons gear as you used to be. Just before we move on to the next bit, do me a quick favour and hit the subscribe button. I would love you very much and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Let's move on. So now that we've ascertained that rushing dungeons is really just not a good idea anymore, what kind of progression should you be in to start playing dungeons? Now just to give an example, I created my dungeon guides quite a while ago and still to this day I get lots of comments like, this dungeon setup was too expensive for me, I only have 500k to spare. And to be honest, in my opinion, if you only have £500,000 a dungeon setup, then I would suggest that you probably stay away from dungeons for a while and try to do other stuff like level up your just basic skills and your combat, slayers and all that jazz. I know times have changed, but when dungeons was originally created, it was actually meant to be for endgame players. And yes, I do know that dungeons were created in a time where superior dragon armor was meta, but still, the fact still stands that it was supposed to be created for more late and to endgame players. So, what progression would I suggest that you be in? And so I asked around a couple of people who are pretty decent at the game, if they were to start out their dungeon career again, what time would they actually start it? And I got kind of a mixture of results. However, on average, I would say that the optimum range was usually having around 50 million coins to spare in a dungeon setup, maybe like skill average like 20 to 25 or something like that, and also having around 300 magical power. However, these are really rough approximations. If you think you're ready for dungeons, then by all means go for it. And as I said at the start, Skyblock, it's your game, it's whatever you want to do. I would say if I was to my Skyblock player again, that's probably around the time that I would get into dungeons, just because I think in Skyblock there's actually quite a lot more stuff to explore and adventure. For instance, I think the End Island update is actually really fantastic for early game players. So if you ask me what I would do now, I'd probably just start the game, start leveling up my base skills and doing stuff like that, then going to level up my combat especially, do some slays and stuff like that, and then with the money from all of that, buy a somewhat okay set of dungeon gear, then get a bunch of accessories to get me to a decent magical power, and then start grinding dungeons and leveling up my catacombs. So just to reiterate, I don't want this guide to be somewhat of like a restrictive boundary that you have to reach these requirements to be able to play dungeons. I just wanted to list the benefits and cons for trying to rush dungeons so you can actually make a choice in yourself on what you want to do when you join dungeons. So I can maybe help you make your own choice about when you want to hop on to the dungeon train. Anyways, that's probably going to wrap up this video. If you enjoyed it as always, then make sure to leave a like, and if you're extra cool, subscribing really helps out the channel as well. Additionally, my Discord's in the bio as well. And with that, thank you very much for watching till the end, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Peace.